This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi. Welcome, everyone. Hope everyone had a great day yesterday. I want to speak out an interesting inyan relevant to Rosh Hashanah. The Ramah in Siman Taf Kuf Pei Gimel writes as follows in Sif Beis Haga Yesh Medaktikim. There are those who are careful. Shaloi lechol egoism, not to eat nuts. She egois v'gematria chet, and egois has a numerical value of chet. After all, egois is a gematria 18. Egois is Aleph Gimel is 4, Vav is 6, 10, Zayin 17, and chet is Ches, Tes 17, and therefore they have the same gematria. So the first question is, they don't have the same gematria because you don't spell chet, ches, tes, you spell ches, tes, aleph, 18. So the first reason is a bit difficult. The gematria is not precise, even though we do know that when it comes to gematria, you're allowed to be one off. In fact, I have a sefer over here called the Pardes Yosef, where he says, well, it's well known gematria could be one off, and they say that it comes from a Rashi in Parshas Va'aschana, and we've mentioned this many times. Rashi says that we have a haftacha v'noi shantem ba'aretz, that if we would be in Eretz Yisrael 852 years, then it says kisoilid banim uvnei banim v'noi shantem ba'aretz v'hishchatem v'asisem pesel, that if we would be in Eretz Yisrael 852 years, Hashem would have to destroy us, so Hashem exiled us after 850. So the question is, we got gypped off a year. Hashem could have kept us there one extra year, and we still would have been okay. The answer is no, because if we would have been there 851 years, that's the equivalent of 852, and then it would have to be fulfilled the ibadat mehera. But it's interesting. In this sefer, it says that he heard this is the makar. Well, it is the makar. The Trumas Hadeshen writes in the sefer Leket Yosher, this is the source. And when it comes to gematria, you're allowed to be one off. Okay, so that's a question. It's a major question. In fact, if you look in some editions in Sefer Yeshaya, in Parak Yud Aleph, Pasuk Aleph, by Rashi, there's a footnote that asks this question. Now, what it's doing there, I'm just curious. Are there like an older Yeshaya here? I'm curious if they have an edition that has it in that print. That's the newer edition. It's not going to be in that one. Is there an older Tanakh? That this question is asked, that why are you now to eat nuts on Rosh Hashanah because gematria chet? It's not gematria chet. Well, this is the Marsham in the Das Torah. He brings down this Maramakim. And it's interesting, the Marasham says that in a footnote on Rashi, this question is asked. The Shaus Teshuvas Hisairis Tshuva also brings down this question, and he says the following answer. He says, every Avera has some redeeming quality to it. Whenever somebody sins, there's always some kind of rationalization, justification, or good motivation. I mean, it's usually 99% rotten and evil to the core, but there's always one kernel of redeeming quality to it. That's the aleph of chet. That's the good part of the chet. So every chet has a good part. So when we say that you can't eat a nut because it's gematria chet, it's gematria the bad part of the chet. There is a good part of the chet, but that's okay. One very interesting answer I saw here in the Sefer Pardes Yosef is he brings an amazing answer. Actually, in the Torah, when the word chet is written, it's always spelled ches, tes, aleph. But there is one exception. In Sefer Bamidbar, Perek Tezvav, Pasuk Chavdaled, it says, Usi'ir izim echad lechatos, and there the word chatos is spelled chaser without an aleph. Now, why is it spelled chaser without an aleph? Because there, we're talking about a specific chet. It's talking about if somebody violates avodah zarah. So interestingly, when the Torah refers to the sin of Avodah Zarah, it's spelled chatas without an aleph. So he says it could be that, look, ein sadik ba'aretz shayasa tov v'layechta, everyone is going to have chataim. But what we're trying to avoid on Rosh Hashanah specifically is a chet which is the very antithesis of the purpose of the day. The purpose of Rosh Hashanah is to accept Hashem as the Melech, as the ruler, as the Mashgiach, as the Boirei, and the chet of Avodah Zarah is the very antithesis of the whole theme of Rosh Hashanah. So the chet that we don't want to allude to is the chet of Avodah Zarah. And in fact, that chet is spelled chasar, that chet is spelled without the aleph. Okay, that's the first reason of the Ramah. The Ramah says another reason. Says Ramah, v'oid, another reason not to have nuts, shehin marbim kecha v'neya umevatlim hatfila. Because they increase the phlegm and the mucus, and they're going to interfere with your davening. Which is true. Nuts, they're a little scratchy, and they are phlegm-inducing, and therefore one should not eat nuts on Rosh Hashanah because it's going to interfere with one's davening. Now, according to that, once, let's say, the second day you've davened mincha already, it would seem you would be allowed to have nuts. The problem, according to the Ramah, is that it's going to interfere with your davening. Now, the Ramah quotes the Maril. If you look in the Maril says it a little bit differently than the way the Ramah quotes it. The Ramah says, Darash Mahari Segel. Mahari Segel is the Maril. Yizaharu kal ha'am shaloi lahaki b'shas hatkiya. Be careful not to cough, and not to sneeze, and not to clear your throat during Tkiyah Shofar. Why?
Is it about the Kiyah or
The Olam. Laman yishmu as kol shalem, because you want to hear the entire noise, the entire sound. V'la yavsek kamloinima, you don't even want to interfere with hearing a hair's breadth. Okay, so in other words, if you're going to, and you're going to miss ever so slightly the beginning of the Tkiyah, so now if you're going to be shortening the Tkiyah, now it's shorter than the Shiur, you're not going to be yotzei. So you say, what do you mean? I heard both. No, trei kali loy mishtamoi. There's a halachik rule. You can't hear two things at the same time. So a person should be very careful. In some shuls, the Rav announces, please refrain from coughing and sneezing during Tkiyah Shofar. I did that once. It did not go over well.
I never heard that.
Yeah.
I've been too many years.
Yeah. The Maril says a person has to be careful not to cough and sneeze during Tkiyah. Anyone who has the need, so I'll see it on the camera. Anyone who has the need, now yeah, it's because even if you only have to hear 30 kailas, right? But still, right? You want to. So I'll say online. Anyone who has the need to cough or sneeze, please take it outside. Or hold it in. Hold it in. Right. Therefore, says Maril, avoid eating any food that's going to produce phlegm. Therefore, says Maril, for this reason, yesh nishar melechel agoizim b'Rosh Hashanah koidem hatekiyah. So according to the Maril's reason, it would come out that after the Tkiyahs, you would be allowed to. There's a third reason given. Now, these are the two reasons that the Ramah quotes. Now, what's interesting is, Rabbi say, according to the first reason that it's Gematria Chet, I can understand why the Ramah says, Yesh medaktikim, you should be careful. But according to the second reason, that it's going to interrupt with your davening, why is it only yesh medaktikim? You would think it should be asur, maybe. There are those who say that because...
Sometimes it's not under control. It's not something...
No, you're not going to make coughing asur, but you can make eating the nuts asur. There is a sefer, Shaus Tshuvas Ravid Hazav, who has a different gersa in the Ramah, who completely takes out the first reason, because the gematria is off, and takes out the words v'yesh medaktikim, and only has the following. Yesh li zoher shaloi lechel agoizim sheheim marbim kecha v'neya. Meaning it's not a diktuk, it's not just like extra careful practice. Don't do it! And he removes the first reason entirely. But our girsa has the first reason. And there is a third reason. the Makar Chaim of the Chavos Yair writes, don't eat nuts, and the reason is al pi soid, meaning it's a Kabbalistic reason. So the question is, what is this Kabbalistic reason? Some suggest as follows. Some suggest
Nuts have some kind of negative connotation in and of themselves.
the Marsham quotes the a medrash. The medrash in Shir Hashirim says, "El ginas egois yoradati," that Klal Yisrael is compared to a nut. Why? That there is a unique feature, facet in how you plant a egois different than any other tree. Every other tree, when you plant it, you cover the roots. It's very important when you plant something to cover the roots. The egois, you uncover the roots. Why? Just like an egois, if you cover the roots, it won't be successful. So too, mechase peshav lo yatzliach. One who covers over his sins and makes it like he didn't sin will not be successful. So Klal Yisrael is compared to the nut. Just like the nut, the roots are revealed. Klal Yisrael says vidoy, and they're megala, they're chatam to Hashem, and they don't hide it. They don't make believe they didn't sin. They acknowledge their sin.
And you should eat nuts.
So then you think you should eat nuts. But there's one day a year you're not allowed to say vidoy. Rosh Hashanah. We don't say vidoy on Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because since the ledgers are open and Hashem is judging us and all the accusing angels are in our face, it's the one day a year we make believe, so to speak, we don't have chatam. How could you bring yourself to say vidoy with all the prosecutors hanging around? So just that's a general thing, Look, no kidding, chatano. That we could get away with, chatano. But to enumerate and articulate exactly how we sin, we don't do on Rosh Hashanah. So the egois, which is the representation of vidoy, that also we don't eat on Rosh Hashanah.
No self-incrimination.
No self-incrimination. Now let me talk to you about a very interesting shaila that I remember I got last year. So a lady wanted to know, could she make fish, pistachio-crusted fish? Right? People like to, on the salmon, gourmet pistachio-crusted fish. Now, let's again talk about, the Rama only brings down two reasons. Number one, it's gematria chet, and number two, it produces phlegm. Now, the first thing you have to know is, what about peanuts? Are you allowed to eat peanuts on Rosh Hashanah? Now, a peanut is not a nut. A peanut is a legume. So, a peanut, there is no Indian not to eat peanuts, other than, people are allergic to peanuts, and in most public places you can't eat peanuts. But you're still allowed to eat peanuts in your house. They haven't forbid that yet. It's not an airplane. So, peanuts are okay. What about hazelnuts? What about pistachio nuts? What about pecans? Well, one second. The reason of the Ramah is egois is gematria chet. A hazelnut is not an egois. A hazelnut is luzim. A pistachio nut is not an egois. A pistachio nut is pistachio. Or however you say it.
Make something a nut then.
Egois. It says egois is gematria chet. Egois specifically refers to a walnut.
Egois is a walnut.
Yes, not a general term for nut. Egois means a walnut. However, that's according to the first reason of the Ramah, that it's gematria chet. But what about according to the second reason of the Ramah? All nuts are phlegm-inducing, right? But now I cooked it. Now, a nut that you eat raw is phlegm-inducing. But if I bake it or I cook it, it's not phlegm-inducing. It's not. The cooking takes out it softens it, it makes it, that's the reality. Easier to digest. It's absorbed with the other food. It's coated with the other food. So here's what the poskim say.
Rabbi, I just got to tell you, I love pistachio. I buy them by a 3-pound bag. They eat them all the time.
Even
I've never in my mind had an issue with coughing or phlegm inducing that I can recall because eating pistachio nuts. So
maybe you've
scientifically.
maybe you've immuned yourself to the effects.
From eating it so much.
Because you ate roasted one. You just said roasted one.
No. Well, I won't. No, if it's cooked, I'm talking about where it's cooked with other food.
Yeah, and he's
So-
out of the shell.
So now here it's like this. What it's going to depend on is what the name of... Now, what would you say if you cooked walnuts into another food? So on the one hand, it's still an egoiz. So egoiz is gematria chet. On the other hand, it's not going to be marba kichavaniya. So the place can say like this, that if it's cooked, it's not marba kichavaniya, but it depends what the food is called. If it's called walnut this, walnut that, walnut cover that, then it's going to be a problem. If it's not called that because it's just a side ingredient, so you don't have the reason of egoiz, gematria chet, and you don't have the reason that it's marba kichavaniya, so then it would be okay. But if you have, let's say, a pistachio cooked into something, so even if you call it pistachio stam is not gematria chet. Elamai, it's gematria. Elamai, it's marba kichavaniya. It's not marba kichavaniya if it's cooked into something. So if you have pistachios cooked into something, not a problem. Pistachios raw, it would seem like the Rama would say, yesh medaktikim, to avoid it. If it's a walnut cooked into something, so if it's a walnut cooked into something, then it would depend on what the name is. If it maintains the name walnut, then maybe better to avoid. If it doesn't have that name, so then neither reason applies. Now, Rabbi Cheskel Roth, he says that even if a walnut is cooked into another food, meikar din would be mutter, but the minhag is still not to eat it. But some places say, well, once the food is made, you could eat it already. But what? A nut cake. So if it's a walnut cake, probably shouldn't do it. But if it's a pecan pie, so what? It would probably be okay.
Why did you pass him for the roasted fish and this lady?
I told her it was okay. So halach l'maisa, pistachio crusted fish, you'd be allowed to have on Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so that concludes this shiur on nuts. And by the way, just to sum it up, if nut is gematria chet, then l'chara there's another thing that we should avoid on Rosh Hashanah, which is also gematria chet. A chet. So probably yesh medaktikim not to do a chet also on Rosh Hashanah. Okay. Rabbi Isai, have a great day.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.